My name is Tori Young. I'm 52, and 3 weeks ago, my 78-year-old father called me crying, the first time I'd ever heard him cry in my life, begging me to come help because family helps family. And for 30 years, I had been the invisible daughter, the one who wasn't worth a college fund, the one who watched my sister Victoria receive everything: the house down payment, the luxury car, the dream wedding, the endless emergency loans, the accolades my parents lavished on her as their success story, while I was just Tori, overlooked, unremarkable, the girl who learned early that her worth was measured not in affection but in practicality. And when my parents needed full-time care after my mother's devastating fall, they didn't call their golden child, they called me. And when I asked my father if he had tried calling Victoria, the silence lasted 47 seconds, long enough for me to realize that the patterns of favoritism, neglect, and invisible labor had persisted for decades. And in those 47 seconds, I understood that I was about to inherit a responsibility no one had prepared me for, yet one I was uniquely equipped to handle after 15 years as a geriatric care nurse. And when I arrived at the hospital, my mother in surgery, my father slumped beside her bed, small and desperate, the doctor explained that both of them could no longer live alone, that full-time care was needed. And I listened, numb yet aware, while my father admitted that Victoria was too fragile, that I had always been reliable, that my decades of unnoticed effort were now the family's lifeline. And as I called Victoria, her voice thick with sleep and excuses, I realized she was drowning financially, $89,000 in credit card debt, unable to offer more than lip service, and yet the audacity to dismiss me as if I had always had an easy life. And in that moment, I recognized that the real battle wasn't just with my parents' care, but with the narrative of my own life, a story where I had worked 2 jobs to put myself through nursing school, while Victoria thrived under a protective bubble, where I had paid for my own small wedding while hers cost $85,000, where my contributions had always been invisible, my sacrifices unacknowledged, and yet here I was, ready to take the reins, to plan, calculate, and prepare, photographing every page of my mother's meticulous financial ledger, which revealed decades of inequality. Victoria had received approximately $342,000 in gifts, loans, and support, while I had received a mere $7,400. And with this evidence, I began to see the full extent of what had been hidden, the scale of favoritism, the impact of their decisions on my life and finances, and I knew that the upcoming family meeting would be decisive, that the hospital would demand clarity, that I could no longer operate in the shadows. And as I arranged the documents, scanned them, and consulted Diane Reeves, a colleague in memory care, I understood the reality. Their savings could last only 18 months with professional care, 2 years if stretched, and without family contributions, the consequences would be dire. And when the meeting arrived, the sterile hospital room, fluorescent lights, long rectangular table, TV screen for Victoria's video call, social worker Rachel Smith, and my aunts Linda and Margaret set the stage for confrontation, and Victoria's immediate attempt to defer responsibility to me, citing financial struggles, her own fragility, and her husband's presence, was met with my calm but unwavering insistence that we account for the decades of unequal support, that fairness and recognition were overdue. And as I presented the ledger, reading aloud every entry: Victoria, college tuition $40,000, graduation car $12,000, wedding $85,000, house down payment $50,000, emergency loans $155,000, the room fell silent, my mother's hands trembling, my father's face pale, Victoria's smug certainty shattered, replaced by a rare flicker of fear. And I turned to my own section: Tori, wedding gift $2,000, baby shower $300, Christmas 1998 $400. The numbers stark, revealing a truth that had long been invisible, that the life I had been forced to construct alone was not a matter of choice, but of survival, of perseverance.
And yet, even amid this revelation, I remained measured, outlining what I could contribute: expertise, time, money with Marcus, regular visits, but refusing to quit my job or accept sole responsibility, establishing boundaries that had never been respected, while Victoria fumbled for excuses, short on solutions. And slowly, incrementally, a plan began to emerge: assisted living for my parents at $7,200 per month, contributions from our family, Tori and Marcus covering $1,500, Victoria reluctantly agreeing to $1,200, an acknowledgement that while imperfect was more than I had ever expected. And in the days that followed, my mother moved to a rehabilitation facility, my father stayed temporarily with Aunt Linda, and I orchestrated the care, managing appointments, finances, and logistics with the precision of decades of nursing experience, while Victoria sent money monthly and visited sporadically, our relationship cautious, civil, stripped of pretense, yet the seeds of a new dynamic had been planted, one where my worth was finally recognized, where my efforts were visible, where the invisible daughter finally had a voice. And 6 months later, as I sat with my mother in her assisted living room, sunlight streaming through the window, watching birds at the feeder, her eyes clear and warm, I understood that love does not require erasure of self, that acknowledgement, presence, and honesty can be as vital as any gift or money, that for decades I had been the steady current, while Victoria burned brightly, and now, at last, there was balance, not complete, not perfect, but enough to be sustainable, enough to be seen. And as I held my mother's hand, whispered that I loved her, and she returned it, a fragile promise of reconciliation, I felt the weight of 52 years lift slightly, knowing that I had stepped into my own power, that the truth had been told, and that for the first time, in the careful orchestration of care, in the recognition of my own history, and in the subtle realignment of responsibility, I had carved a space where Tori Young was no longer invisible, where decades of quiet strength had finally been acknowledged, and where the future, though uncertain, could be approached with clarity, dignity, and the quiet triumph of a life finally accounted for.